Just as old sisters, old chapter 6, old friends and new. When Raindrops finally laid eyes on the field of which Duke Blueblood had promised to every farmer in Ponyville, she saw that it was an even worse shape than Carrot Top had described. Dozens of rocks and boulders were nestled between thorns, rotting logs, and ancient tree stumps that were anchored to the ground with long, thick roots. There was even a rusting plow half buried next to a boulder, and when Raindrops looked closer, she saw that it was crawling with red warriors. All in all, it wasn't her ideal place to spend a morning. But she was helping out a friend, and besides, it'd be great to deal with a problem she could physically subdue, instead of the legal shenanigans Juggernaut had trapped her in for the past couple days. And so, when she turned back to her brother, Carrot Top, and dozens of other ponies who were watching her, she had a big smile on her face. "Ready!" she said as she flew back to the front of the field. "Let's do this!" Carrot Top nodded and gave her a hug. "Thanks again for doing this. You're an awesome friend." Raindrops blushed. "Yeah, I know." "Good morning," called Mayor Mare. Those gathered around the field, which included the elements, most of Ponyville's farming community, and several foals, turned to see Mayor Scrolls walk up to the group. "Representative Lunamoon just contacted me. I understand our contactors for this field have come to an arrangement." Raindrops looked at Applejack. The apple farmer had been happy to be woken up the previous night, but he teared when Raindrops explained the compromise. "Well, half," Applejack said. "We're going to race to clear the field." "Dennery's dividing the field into 100 equal blocks," added Carrot Top. The teacher in question, clad in a beekeeper's outfit to prevent her from being scratched by thorns, put her head out from behind a boulder and waved. Several miniature flags back, as they watched them pounding one to the ground, fist marking the square. "Unhappiness will start at the same time, and clear as many squares as they can. When they're all done, we get to keep the squares our champions cleared." "Who are your champions?" I called Red Onion. "We've got all harvest next week. If you break your hose, the union has to bail you out." "Not a problem." And Carrot Top grabbed Raindrops' leg and held it high before she could do anything. "My good friend Raindrops will be my first champion. I know she's tough enough to take whatever this field's got. And my second champion will be her little brother, Snails." There was some clapping, mostly from the elements of union ponies, as Raindrops tried out of the field. "You're a very important part of this team," she called to her brother. "Get ready when I call you." "Right," Snails saluted. Though he was clearly trying to look serious, he was unable to hide his massive grin. "You got it." Applejack nodded. "And my champion's Juggernaut." There was more clapping as the massive pony entered the field, although I understand she's got something to say first. Juggernaut looked nervous for a moment, but then bowed her head. "I see, Sonny," she told him. "For battling ponies, for distracting foes at school, and..." She turned to Applebloom and Firelock, both standing near Applejack. "For making Little Fizzy dizzy. I am very sorry." "He's okay," called Applebloom, smiling brightly. "Let's do a real good job clearing the field, and all will be forgiven." The ponies laughed, and Juggernaut began to say something else, but then Pinky jumped out of the crowd. "Don't stick my super big sister Maud!" she shouted. Gray Pony plodded into the field as Pinky grinned. "Don't forget her!" And Applejack and Carrot Top looked at each other, and Juggernaut frowned, and Raindrops snorted to herself. Mayor Scrolls wasn't shutting Pinky down, she thought, so apparently the rumor about Duke Blueblood having promised his field to Pinky's alligator, as well as Applejack and Carrot Top weren't entirely false, but ultimately Raindrops knew it didn't matter. Just another competitor, nothing more than that. She'd fight hard, beat one or two of the champions, claim as much of the field as she could for her friend. Cheerily, meanwhile, finished setting up the grid. "We're good," she said. 100 squares, as equal as I can make them. If any pony wants to check..." "I'll trust you," said Applejack, and Carrot Top nodded her agreement. "No problems there." She turned to Mayor Scrolls as Cheerily stepped out of the field. "If you'd kick us off?" "Of course," said the mayor. "On 3, 1. Raindrops knelt, facing the big boulder right in front of her. She saw her sword next to her. Somewhere in the crowd, Trixie yelled, "Go, Raindrops! So that risky what you can do." The other elements chimed in similar comments. 2. Time seemed to slow. Raindrops took a deep breath. 3. Raindrops blasted into the field and almost ran to the first boulder. She stopped just short and wrapped her hose around it, then heaved with all her strength and managed to pry it loose from the dirt. It was tough. It wasn't just big, but it was attached to the ground by decades of long grasses and other plants which had grown around it and held it down like a net. But Raindrops grit her teeth and put her back into it, and managed to yank it into the air. She staggered for a moment as the heavy block tore down on her, but then she reared back and managed to hurl it out of the field. It thudded to one side as ponies gasped and applauded, but before it even stopped moving, Raindrops charged at another. She glanced briefly to one side to see Juggernaut pounding a boulder into gravel, and to her other see Maud Pie lifting a massive rock with a single hoof and casually lobbing it clear across town. The next moment, though, she reached the next rock and began pulling it up. She moved 4 boulders before her first square looked like it was close to clear. At one point, her hoof smashed against a rock, which was hiding under the grass, and she yelped and finished a horseshoe clip. But she took it off and pulled up the rock before throwing it with the others. Then, wiping sweat from her forehead, she began working on the tree trunks. As she glanced to one side, saw that Juggernaut was finishing up her first square. As he watched, the massive mare shattered another boulder with a well-placed sword stroke and flung the shards away with her telekinesis. But then Raindrops brought her gaze back to her own task as she yanked the last tree trunk in front of her, ripped it out of the ground, roots and all. She hurled it to one side with the other debris. Then, as Shirley dashed out to plant a flag with her cutie mark in the center of the now clear square, she ran to the next part of the grid. Minutes bled into one another as she worked. Boulder after boulder flew from the field, some smashing into each other and cracking, others stacking in formations she knew countless foes would later try to scale. She pushed those thoughts aside and continued to labor, ripping at rocks, dead trees, tangled vines, and even the occasional bit of trash. All went flying out of the field, with only pristine soft soil remaining by the time Raindrops moved on. And, as she cleared the 4th square, she noticed Juggernaut wasn't that far ahead of her. Raindrops glanced at the other mare and saw her lumbering from one boulder to another as she moved through a square where the rocks were sparser. That made sense, he thought. Juggernaut was blazing fast when she could build up speed, and like she had given Apple Bloom, fire like a Skulu a pony ride. But there was no space for that in the field. Her body was too massive to be able to sprint every time she had to move a few feet to another rock. Raindrops was a relatively slow-moving mare, but Juggernaut seemed slower still, at least in the confines of the challenge. Of course, the mercenary was stronger than Raindrops. Bing McIntosh was keeping score for Juggernaut to its cutie mark in the 5 squares she had already cleared. Shirley had only been able to plant flag on Raindrops' mark at 4, but Raindrops knew that didn't necessarily matter. Raindrops had another advantage which she couldn't hesitate to deploy as soon as it would be useful. With that, she might be able to pull ahead and get carrot top for the majority of scales. At that time came 3 squares later. She heard Juggernaut yelp and turned to see the massive mare slapping at herself while black and red rants ran over her coat. Raindrops snorted and looked at the boulder in front of her and realized that the bug-infested plow was next to it. She froze over her hose inches from debris as the ants turned toward her. "Snails!" she called. "Help!" Snails scampered through the field, taking care to stay in the square as Raindrop had cleaned the debris so he wouldn't crack a hoof on a rock by accident. Scared to a halt by Raindrop's side, Levy flew to the ground as Snails knelt and began to communicate with the bugs. Nothing happened for a few moments, but then Snails started, "Okay!" and Raindrop saw the ants dispersing into the grass. She gave her brother a high hoof before ripping into the plow from the ground, disposing it. And in time it took Juggernaut to get the bugs off her coat, Raindrops had cleared 3 boulders in a tree trunk, almost halving the gap between them. Time passed, but Raindrops barely noticed. She had to stop 3 more times for Snails to run out and deal with bugs. Had to stop just as often, and the larger mare took longer to get started again whenever critters swarmed towards her. Snails also occasionally carried water or cider to his sister, as well as a hat when the sun began to move directly overhead. The elements and farmers cheered her from the sidelines, and Raindrops let that drive her, pushing the thoughts of exhaustion and pain out of her mind. She also heard the trust farmhands and most of the rooting for Juggernaut, as well as Pinky squealing Maud's name, but ignored them. There was only the field in front of her. She felt the cooling presence of shade and realized she had made it to the Everfreeze border, the last few squares of the field. She heaved a heavy boulder aside and found herself looking at a Timberwolf, which growled at her and snapped its jaws. She narrowed her eyes at it, then casually turned to one side, picked up a boulder, and hurled it away. The Timberwolf blinked, then squeaked something and scampered away. Raindrops chuckled before continuing on. Then at last there was nothing left to clear. She moved one boulder and found herself staring at Juggernaut's bulk. The other pony was breathing heavily, sweating so hard her coat was matted, but she seemed more excited than exhausted. "We done, duh?" Juggernaut agreed. Asked. "Yeah," agreed Raindrops. Exhausted began prickling through her mind. But she sat it away for a few moments longer. The field behind him was empty of everything but grass and dirt. Shirley and Big Magatos were already counting the clean squares. "Good mats." "Indeed." Juggernaut clapped Raindrops' hoof in a grip so hard that it broke off. "You're a worthy opponent. I'm glad we compete." Raindrops managed a smile as he extracted her hoof. Sure," she said. "Me too." "Not like other pony." Juggernaut frowned back towards the front of the field. "She not do much. I do not know why she's here." Turning, Raindrops saw that Maud appeared to only clear a few squares. Afterwards, she seemed to have dug some kind of pool and set up a picnic area. As Raindrops watched, the mare lifted a massive stone bench, which had apparently sculpted from a boulder, using only her hose to set it down. "I don't think the pies wanted to grow cars here," said Raindrops. "They just wanted a nice picnic area for Gummy. Or Piggy did, anyway." Indeed, picking around, tossing flags with Maud's cutie mark all over the squares he cleaned up. "Maud is Piggy's big sister, so when Piggy told her she wanted a picnic for her alligator..." Juggernaut noted slowly. "I see," she said. Sounded like she did. Raindrops smiled to herself. Maybe she thought Juggernaut was making progress after all. Shirley and Big Magatos trotted up the mayor's scrolls and conferred her with a moment before they all nodded. The mayor turned to the crowd and raised her voice. "All the squares will be cleared," she said, "and the pony who cleared the most was..." Just tensed in the distant crowds, you could see Carrot Top doing the same. "Juggernaut with 52 squares, Raindrops cleared 44, and Maud cleared 4. As such, Sweet Apple Acres will be granted 52% of the farm Juggernaut cleared. Golden Harvest will take 44%, and Gummy the Alligator's owner, Pinky, will take the remainder." Raindrops let out a long breath, even as she heard Apples pinking and Applejack cheering. She knew that even doing that well against Juggernaut, against the pony whom the Minister of War had judged to be the strongest in Equestria, was a great accomplishment. And since he managed to get Carrot Top over 40% of a property, she had no chance of acquiring otherwise. Still, she thought, it would have been nice to win. "Yay!" Steele started to hear a chance into Raindrops. He threw his arms around her in a big hug. "We were awesome," he cheered. "We did really good. And now Miss Carrot Top's happy, and I made a whole bunch of new buggy friends." "Friends?" Raindrops blinked, as all the host snails waited in front of her. Hundreds of hands were running around it, and dozens of them carrying Levy on their backs. Raindrops watched this real gesture directed at the ants displaying that. Snails nodded. "War ants are really good at following orders. Me and Levi are going to get them to do tricks." For a moment, Raindrops probably thought she should worry about that, but then she looked at her brother's smile and could only say, "That sounds great, Squirt." She hugged him. "You did good." The two embraced for a moment, and then Raindrops felt some pony big moving to her left. She turned to see Juggernaut seizing her sword and looking around awkwardly, as if she wasn't sure what to do next. Well, she probably wasn't. Raindrops thought, "Hey," she said, "Juggernaut, look." When the other mayor glanced at her, Raindrops gestured at the smiling snails, who was giggling as he played with his ants. And she pointed Carrot Top and Applejack, both much happier than they had in the past few days. Applejack laughed at something and shook Carrot Top's hoof, and the other mayor beamed as he spoke. "Isn't this better than we just fought?" she asked. "You better not ask me, Raindrops. You better not ask me. Because I like fighting." Juggernaut looked puzzled, then considered for a long moment. Raindrops saw her eyes flick over the smiling ponies around her. Then once to see her relax and enjoy themselves. "Duh," she said, all crept over her face. "I think so." "You also think that I just got blue-balled!" "Great!" Raindrops sighed in relief. "Don't know about you, but I'm hungry. Before you leave town, want to go to the party?" "Party?" She nodded at Applejack and Carrot Top, who returned to the cheering crowd. "All right, Rapelli," called the apple farmer. "To celebrate this here contest, Carrot Top and I'll be hosting a big old shindig at Sweet Apple Acres. God, that's a great apple and carrot treats for y'all. Any pony who wants them is welcome." Most of the crowd cheered began to follow her, though Raindrops saw her friends approaching her instead. They reached her and began to congratulate her, with Trixie loudly proclaiming how The strong and mighty Raindrops was indeed the most powerful warrior to be found, and Lyra already working on how she turned the struggle into a ballad. Steels bounced around, growing more antsy by the moment. Eventually he asked, "Can we go to the party, sis, please?" "Sounds good." Raindrops began to turn to her friends. "Can we Juggernaut?" The big mare looked mostly confused. "Why don't you party?" she asked. "Well, if you're hungry, you can eat pie." Raindrops pointed at Pinkie Pie, who was bouncing towards Sweet Apple Acres with her sister by her side. The pie-laying wagon hissed to her. "You can tell jokes, and you can play games." She saw another pony walking up behind Juggernaut and grinned. "For instance, you can offer to hoof wrestle other ponies in Ponyville to see if you're the strongest pony here." Juggernaut chuckled. "I beat you," she said. "I know strongest pony in Ponyville." Raindrops glanced behind Juggernaut. The gigantic mare turned to see Big Macintosh, looking at her with a faint smirk on his face. "Nope," he said. "Duh!" insisted Juggernaut. "I strongest!" She tried to the edge of the field and kicked the boulder, shattering it. Big Macintosh Juggernaut kicked the boulder next to hers. Burst into shards and disintegrated. Big Mac smiled serenely at Juggernaut, but a smirk tugged at his mouth as he repeated, "Nope." The two ponies looked at each other, smiles crossed on their faces. "Okay," said Juggernaut, turning back to Raindrops. "I go to party, and I hoof wrestle this pony." Raindrops couldn't stop herself from chuckling as Juggernaut, Big Macintosh began to trot off. She felt herself grinning as she began to lead the elements along the same path. She heard them laughing as well. All in all, she thought as her brother hopped onto her back and began to walk with her best friends towards a party to her other friends, it was a pretty good day. Raindrops hadn't thought she would want to return to Canterlot for months after she'd been trapped in the city by Fisher's inane declaration of martial law. But barely 3 weeks later, she found herself walking from a quaint cafe to the historic district on the north side of Cantlehorn. She smiled as a low-hanging cloud pushed around the building next to her, setting a bit of water, which dripped out and spattered over the ground. The entire city was wreathed in clouds, and it looked like a storm could break out at any time. A good day, Raindrops thought. Burnthill Asylum had been built on an old mansion, once owned by a prominent philanthropist, separating its neighbors by spacious fields, elegant hedges, and enough magical wards to keep out an invading army. Raindrops reached the historic district, made her way to the checkpoints, and reached the visitors area, always slightly behind schedule. She found herself in a baroque conservatory, which had couches and tables arranged in a regular pattern, except for the occasional bulky orderly stationed by some of the other ponies seated in the room. It looked a little different than any other large rounds. "The Raindrops!" The weather mare turned to see Juggernaut walking in. Behind her was another pony, this one almost as massive a pony, and the horn looked like it snapped off halfway. "I glad you come." The other pony, Goliath, looked up and stared at Raindrops for a moment, then looked at his big sister with a nervous expression. Juggernaut smiled and gently embraced him, then spoke several sentences in Russian. When Goliath finally nodded, Juggernaut turned to Raindrops. "You come close? Say hi." Raindrops cautiously advanced. Hi," she said to Goliath. "You okay?" He nodded, as it was taking him a while to process the question. "He hurt me?" he asked in a labored voice, as to taxing him to vocalize even that much. Raindrops shook her head. "No." Goliath looked to his big sister, who nodded. "She tells the truth," she said in equestrian, which Raindrops guessed was for her benefit. "And see I stop her. I beat her at competition. I show how strong I am." She drew closer to her brother. "No pony hurts you, I swear." Her little brother smiled slightly, turned to Raindrops, who nodded. "It's true. She's stronger than I am. She would never let anything bad happen to you." She struck her out huff. "Don't want to hurt you anyways. You won't hurt other ponies again, will you?" Goliath tilted his head. Juggernaut quickly translated. Goliath shook his head rapidly. "No," he insisted. "No." The two orderlies began to approach, but Juggernaut hugged Goliath and he calmed. Raindrops smiled at him. "Did I not hurt you? Your sister not let me hurt you, okay?" Goliath slowly nodded as he understood. "Okay," he said, filled them both in a massive hug. Raindrops winced. It was a rare experience for her to be trapped in a bone-cracking hug, instead of being on the giving end of it. But she was strong herself and just smiled and squeezed back as hard as she could. When the hug was over, Goliath looked from his sister to Raindrops. Friends? Raindrops and I, friends, agreed Juggernaut. Yes. Raindrops smiled and pointed at Goliath. If you don't hurt ponies, we can all be friends. After a moment, Goliath smiled even more brightly. All friends, he repeated. Good. They spoke for a few moments before Raindrops excused herself to let the siblings talk. Juggernaut and Goliath both waved goodbye to her, and she returned it. Exited the mansion and flew down to the warehouse of the streets of the city. She made her way towards one particular building, flew inside through a broken window, ignoring the rusting pieces of machinery and half-rotten crates stacked against one wall. Instead, she flew to the nondescript door on one side of the warehouse and sat down in the staircase behind it. She reached the bottom within moments and stepped into another world. A garden stretched before her that was as big as a city block. Flowers of all kinds grew in riotous patterns, apparently chaotic, but somehow flowing so smoothly from one patch to the next, and only to be the result of some intricate design. There were bushes, shrubs, and even a few short trees heavily laden with fruit. Interspersed with them were a couple of places for resting and a small water feature. It was a slice of paradise buried under the grime of Caroline's stinking warehouse district. Raindrops had to admit that, as much as she disliked the pony who tended this garden, he was undeniably good at his job. Ah, Raindrops. Hello. Duke Greengrass, a brown-coated stallion with a garish red mane and a red X-rig, trotted out of a small closet in one of the walls. He was balancing a potted rose on his back and headed to his saddlebag. So glad you allowed Snails to take me up on my... He's truly been an invaluable help today. Raindrops looked around and saw Snails kneeling down by a patch of flowers, which seemed duller than the others. He was examining some bugs, bee-like creatures that had purple instead of yellow stripes, and flew upside down with a magnifying glass. The big field guide that his mother's shutterbug had gotten him for his birthday was on the dirt to the left. After a moment, though, he looked up and waved. Hi, Raindrops, look! He struck out his hoof, and the upside-down bees flew to it, flipping over before landing. Salient inverted bees! They're supposed to be perfect for that kind of daisy, but they haven't been working out, said Greengrass. So, Snails, after first saying hello to as many bugs as he could find, has been helping me learn why. The Duke nodded. He's made excellent progress. Uh-huh, Snails nodded vigorously. They need mango juice in their diet to keep their energy up, and these bees say that the juice Greenie is providing them doesn't have enough sugar, so they're tired. Snails beamed as he put them away and tried over to Raindrops. I also helped sort out the ants on the west wall, so they aren't feuding anymore. And before lunch, I cheered up a bunch of sad worms so they could dig more tunnels and let more water into the soil. His face was as bright as Raindrops had ever seen it. Mr. Greenie said I did great. Raindrops nodded. Glad to hear it. But you do have to go soon. Snails sighed, but Raindrops chuckled. Go get your things together, and I'll take you home. When Snails ran to find his bags, Greengrass turned to Raindrops. Incidentally, I appreciate you looking past your dislike of me and allowing your brother to take advantage of this opportunity. You won't regret this. Raindrops shrugged. I didn't want to let him do this, she said in a frank tone. But let's just say I've been reminded how important it is to consider other ponies beside myself. He really wanted to do this, and I'm his big sister. I'm supposed to support him, not just make him do what I want. She chuckled. You might think about that sometime. Why else do you think I would do this? Greengrass watched the snail stop and knelt to talk to a bug poking its head out of the ground. I might not have much power in the court anymore, but I'd rather like to do something more with my life than just tend a garden no pony sees. If I can help encourage a few colts and fillies to develop their talents, nurture them as I would any flower. Raindrops snored. You know, Barry Max told us about your silly garden metaphors. My dear Raindrops, if I didn't make any silly garden metaphors, I might never talk at all. Then where would we be? Raindrops considered. Paradise? She hopped to another green grass, but instead the Duke just laughed, as she rolled her eyes. After verifying Snails was still talking to the bugs, he had, How is Max anyways? Quite well, said Greengrass. The princess provided him with a small corps called the Special Investigative Unit, which is basically a few investigators and detectives under his direct command. It seems Dustin's pony was growing that her secret cult friend can't go 6 weeks without charging head first into some nasty criminal. So she prevailed upon Luna to give him a few ponies to handle that sort of thing on his behalf. Did that work? Asked Raindrops. Greengrass chuckled and passed Raindrops a newspaper from his bag. Raindrops opened it and immediately saw a picture of 6 ponies, all wearing red coats, big hats, and badges labeled SIU, standing in front of a banner labeled Fashion Fair. 3 shackled ponies stand between the SEIU investigators, and other ponies with fancy outfits and relieved looks, including Rarity, Raindrops noticed, scared about. She began to read the whole article aloud. Fair was attacked yesterday by Pop Stitz, a clothes designer who had been disqualified for stealing designs from her competitors, and who was planning to spatter all the models with paint and destroy her competitors' clothes in revenge. Fortunately, the new Special Investigation Unit was able to intervene and capture those malcontents just before this attack took place. According to Silver Star, former sheriff who now runs an orphanage and volunteers with the SIU part-time, if Stitz had succeeded, she could have ruined literally dozens of dresses in hopes of 25 designers, many of whom traveled to Camelot from distant provinces, thus to showcase their wares in front of the court. The women snored. Where's Barry Max when this happened? The picture. Raindrops quickly saw the mountain queuing mark. Was later identified the helpless stallion with the overturned paint bucket on his head. Barry Mounting Max, the Nipplar, was on Earth to supervise the first investigation of his new unit, personally saved the dress of the Silent ambassador by jumping in front of Stitz's last paint clan. When Justice Frank Raposi, who was in the area for unclear reason, asked him if he had anything to say for himself, he tugged at the can and told her, "It's stuck." Raindrops couldn't help but laugh as he lowered the paper. "You have strange friends." "I try." Greengrass hesitated. "Speaking of friends, and gestures thereof, I could have one of my staff personally escort Snails to and from Ponyville when he comes to work in my garden, if you wish. You don't need to personally separate him." "Maybe eventually," said Raindrops, "but today he wanted me." "Oh. I thought perhaps you feared I might abduct him." "I was afraid of that. Do you really think I left him for you this afternoon?" Raindrops shook her head. "Max says he reformed. You did say so, sell him out to the mob. So even though I don't like you, I tentatively trust you, and I'll let you work with him in your garden if he really wants. But you want one hair on his mane." Greengrass sighed melodramatically. "You bugged me off a counterhorn, I know." "Glad we understand each other." Raindrops smiled, and then turned to Snails as her brother finally approached. "Snails will be able to come back here. Oh, in at least 1 every 2 weeks or so." See, Snails grinned, and Raindrops chuckled and continued. "Maybe more in the summer, when the school's out." "In the summer, I'll be starting work on some above-ground plots," said Greengrass in a light tone. "I'll probably need some more helpers. Perhaps even enough that I won't be able to watch them all myself. So, Snails, when that time comes, I might put you in charge of my other assistants, if you do a good job now, and I trust that's acceptable." Snails' face brightened even further until it was practically alight with vanity. Raindrops realized he was smiling too, so he turned to the Duke and said, "I think he's okay with that." Raindrops said Snails waved goodbye to Greengrass and left with him. No sooner had he stepped into the street, Snails embraced Raindrops. "Thanks again for letting me help Greenie with his bugs," he said. "You're the best big sister ever." "I know." Raindrops lifted Snails into her back. "Don't you forget." She steadied with him on her wings, and then called, "Hold on!" and took off. He looked behind her as he flew towards the train station, and couldn't help but grin. She made some new friends, helped out Carrot Top, but most importantly, she fulfilled her duty as a big sister, and done right by her brother. And that was what mattered. This is a really good fic. That's mainly what I gotta say. Characterization was on point. The characters were really good. The story moved at a good pace, and while it almost seemed like a ripoff of the previous title match story, it wasn't. It came off as unique. I only have one complaint. This fic blue-balled me! We had a good setup for a good fight. We had a good setup for a rumble. But no. We worked it out with compromise and talking to each other. Look, I know. This works really, really well with the themes of MLP in general, with Fim in general. I could see it working as an actual episode, and it's really good as an episode of a series that's all about friendship. I get it. But you guys have got to understand, I'm always the type of guy who prefers a really good rumble. I like fighting. I like punching things. So, you give me a cool setup like this, and then you blue ball me with compromise, I'm going to feel a little down. Next time I'm going to try to see if I can't do the Sonic Fit crossover with MLP. There will be a good one. If not, a couple Sonic Fix that I'm quite interested in. That, or follow the Equestria. You'll never know.